Next, we sit down with former president of the Illinois Bar Association, John Thies, and discuss how the high cost of law school is affecting the development of attorneys and the legal field in general. This runs about 10 minutes.
John Thies, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel. It's been a while since we spoke. You were the head of the Illinois Bar Association for a year, right. 2012 to 2013, and we intersected a number of times during that year. So it's great to see you again and have you back on.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
We wanted to ask about something that, as we cover the legal arena in Illinois, and one of the issues that comes up, a couple of issues come up frequently. One is the cost of the legal system, and also just the cost of higher education and the intersection of what's happening, among other places, in our law schools around the state. There's a number of great law schools, but I think over the last 10 years or so, some of the admissions to those have been challenging, and in part maybe because of the cost of going through school. And we wanted just to get your thoughts on where we are in that realm, and what impact does higher education have on the execution of the law and the development of lawyers?
Well, first of all, to me, it's about our system of justice, and the core of that is our court system and the lawyers that work in the court system, and the judges, of course, that administer it. And so as I was preparing to be president of the Illinois State Bar Association, identifying the issues that I would be working with, in some cases on a day-to-day basis, the issue of whether our system can continue in the way it had was very important to me, because what was happening then, it wasn't being discussed very much, but what was happening then was that we were seeing the cost of legal education get so high, and the way that the additional cost was being addressed was through borrowing, that we were seeing graduating lawyers unable to go out and work in places where they had traditionally worked. So we're talking about not just legal aid or state's attorney's offices, but also even in the private practice of law in law firms around the state. So faced with what I saw to be one of the great challenges of the day for our profession, I created a special committee on the impact of the law student debt crisis on the delivery of legal service. We had hearings around the state, and we produced a report that really was quite significant. It included not only references to the information we had obtained in the hearings, other research that had been done, and also recommendations for how we should move forward. Bottom line is that we really can't continue with the status quo and expect to be able to meet the legal needs of the citizens of the state. This gained traction. The blogosphere picked up our report, and it was got a lot of very, very good attention across the country, including by the American Bar Association. It's not just because of this report, but our report had a fair amount to do with it. This is now a topic that's not foreign at the law schools or in bar associations around the country. A lot of people are talking about it. But one of the most interesting things that happened in the course of all of this was I got contacted by provosts who would say, what's happening in the legal profession, this is like the canary in the coal mine. This is telling us, because this is all about not just the law business, but it's also about higher education generally. And I think they were right. They were saying that we are continuing to see the costs of educating the next generation of our citizens and of the leaders of our states and our countries. We're seeing the cost of that go up to the point where it's going to be prohibitive for a lot of families. And when I heard that, I thought, number one, we touched on something important that maybe will help the greater public policy debate, but it'll also cause us to maybe take a step back and start thinking of reform. Because if we don't, we're going to see us going back into more of an elitist higher education system, which, Abraham Lincoln was instrumental in creating the opportunities for land grant institutions like the University of Illinois. Why was that so successful in the development of our country? It was because the middle class, not just the elite, and even beyond the middle class to the working poor, they were able to have their kids go to college. And I don't think we want to be so dismissive of the value of having broad-based higher education.
So as it manifests itself, someone is going to be have such a crushing debt load. Is the impact therefore that they can't go to work perhaps in a smaller law firm where arguably it might be a greater learning environment because of the range of cases and the kind of clients they would deal with? Whereas if they're forced to go to a more of a corporate law firm or big city law firm, let's say, they might be making the money to be able to afford their college education, their legal education, but they can tend to be pigeonholed and work in a narrow slice of the law, and then in their early years not necessarily get that great foundational knowledge of whether it's civil, working both criminal law and civil law. Is that a legitimate issue?
It's an accurate description of one of the considerations that we have. There are other factors too that weigh in. What's happened since I was ISBA president is that the way that our profession has evolved, you're seeing fewer mid-sized firms, particularly in the big cities. You're still seeing the mega firms, the 1,000+ member firms. Those tend to be growing, believe it or not. And you're still seeing really a thriving core of smaller firms. However, if you talk to smaller firm lawyers, whether they're in the big city or they're not, many of them are baby boomers who are looking at how to retire. And are they in a position to sell their practice? And you can't sell it to someone who can't afford to work in that environment, and that's often driven by the issue of debt. The other factor that shouldn't be forgotten is that law school applications are down. Entrance to law schools are down, and that's happening. There's just no denying that it's being impacted by the high cost of being trained to be a lawyer. And that's bad for society because there's so many extraordinary things that lawyers do, not just in the practice of law, but the way they serve in their communities. So I think that we are unique as a profession in our ability to do a lot of things for the benefit of communities. And so those are just a few of the things that have resulted from our inability to control the cost of a legal education. Things are improving, though. As I mentioned before, the law schools are more aware of this. Some of the reformers are taking steps to train lawyers in different ways that would be more cost effective. But we've got a long way to go. You're still seeing six-figure debt when people get out of law school, and that is so different than the way it was when I graduated, and it's not a sustainable model. We've got to make a change.
Has anyone discovered, or are there any great ideas out there that are being implemented as far as bringing down the cost of a legal education?
Yes. Something that I've advocated for a long time has now gotten the ABA's approval. The ABA is the accrediting body. They have a semi-autonomous portion of the American Bar Association that does the accreditation for law schools. And that organization has approved the concept of law students who can clerk in, for example, law firm settings and get paid and get credit. The significance of that is that it's going to get law students into a less expensive, in some cases more effective training situation. It's also allowing them to have a leg up in getting a job. And so all of those things I see as positives. The losers in that equation, first of all, I think this is an illusory argument because arguably it's the law schools that lose because they don't teach as many classes. But I think the law schools have a real opportunity to manage these sorts of arrangements that it leads to lower cost education, it leads to people getting more jobs, and in many cases, students being trained better.
And lastly, lest anyone think this is about just lawyers and saying, why should I cry crocodile tears for lawyers? The fact of the matter is, people are going to need legal counsel from time to time, whether for whatever reason, for a business, maybe it's a divorce, any number of cases. And to the extent that people have to interact with the law, and they do, you don't want the average person to be priced out of the market of being able to get adequate counsel, right?
Well, that's right, and it's why a moment ago I mentioned the role that the legal profession plays in the administration of justice. If you ask a judge the best way to run a case through the system, the judge will tell you that there's great value in competent legal counsel on both sides of a particular case. And so there really are consequences, not just to whether someone is adequately represented, but toward the overall administration of justice. And that's not to mention that judges are lawyers. You know, you don't become a judge unless you're a lawyer. And I've heard some judges who have been very concerned that we won't have quality judicial candidates if we don't continue to have high quality members of the legal profession. So all is not lost. I mean, we have accomplished an enormous amount in the profession and in the way we've dealt with very difficult circumstances in our court system. But part of the reason that we've been as successful as we have been, it's because well-meaning, thoughtful people have taken up these challenges, made sure that people are aware of them, and then they set out to try to handle or create the reforms that will make things better for everybody.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us again about this issue, and hopefully we can visit again before too long.
Terry, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.